Autistic people are just more logical, aren't we? Aren't we? I can't believe there's still so much Aspie Supremacy out there, even though I made a video about it. Unbelievable, frankly, that the problem persists. I thought I'd fixed it, but I've been on TikTok again, and it looks like another video's needed. I'm sure this'll put an end to it.
When you, as a neurotypical, tell me it's not that deep, when I'm speaking about things at a higher level that you can comprehend, you're just telling me that you can't comprehend thinking about things more than surface level. All you are doing is showing me that we are on two separate planes of intelligence and that this conversation is not going to work because you cannot understand what I am talking about. Your brain is shallow. Your brain thinks at things at surface level. You know, some people are just like that. Some people are just like that.
Autism exists as an evolutionary strategy to mitigate groupthink, but it only works if we respect autistic people as human beings. Because non-autistic people, allistic people, have a tendency to go with the group. You need people. Society, in order to function, needs people who challenge the norms. That's why autism is here. It functions like that. It balances humanity. That's what it is. That's the reason that almost every major philosopher was pretty obviously on the spectrum.
Research into evolutionary psychology suggests that people with these traits were better hunter-gatherers. Much better, in fact. And I kinda agree. With better environmental awareness, people with ADHD are able to spot things around them better than those neurotypical. Constantly scanning the environment means we're better at picking out signs of food or danger, like predators. Our hyperactivity and greater levels of stamina is perfect for that nomadic traveling lifestyle as well. We're also better at adapting quickly to ever-changing situations and threats and opportunities as well. On the autistic side of things, we have specialized knowledge. By having keen, specialized interests, we're able to focus in on particular skills, which can be beneficial to the overall tribe. Our propensity for keeping things in the right place, in the right order, likely helped with the storage of food. Our predisposition towards fairness and justice likely helped us when we came together as tribes to prevent conflict as well. We absolutely despise one rule for me, another for thee. You're just better evolved for the world the way it has been for most of humanity's existence.
There's this theory that autism is the default when it comes to European hunter-gatherer societies, but our brains became domesticated along with our bodies.
Same. I'm an animal whisperer. Interesting. Never knew why I was telepathic and are great in the nature.
Totally agree with this tribe theory. From ancient times, we have had our place in the tribe as the spiritual leaders, the shaman, the seer. We might also have been the storytellers, the innovators, and the healers, and the hunters. Everyone has their use in the tribe. The psychopaths were the tribal guardians, or police. The others were homemakers, gatherers, clothes makers, etc. Liked by OP. You know, I remember leaving a comment on that video about the risks of evolutionary psychology and Aspie Supremacy. Seems to not be there anymore. That one about telepathy, though. No hate, though, to any of these creators. I am far too logical and rational to do such a silly and shallow thing as hate. I actually come from a long line of philosophers and conflict mitigators. Really, though, there is no hate. I am annoyed, though. Annoyed enough to want to make a video. Just a little one, you know, just a quick casual ditty about logic and reason and emotions and feeling and the basis of all human motivation. And you know how you can't reason someone out of a position that they didn't reason themselves into? Of course you do, but just in case. We usually say that when we're talking about being unable to use facts to change people's emotions. That it's pointless trying to use logical arguments to change an emotionally induced position. If you believe something not because you've analysed the facts, but because it speaks to your feelings, then only more emotion can change that belief. It implies a dichotomy of thinking, in which some opinions are formed by logic and others by emotion. And then it implies a hierarchy of thinking, in which the opinions formed by facts and logic obviously outweigh the ones formed by emotion. That phrase is usually attributed to Jonathan Swift, who said, "Reasoning will never make a man correct an ill opinion which by reasoning he never acquired." The internet quote websites also credit Fisher Ames with making the sentiment popular. Ames said, "I have heard it remarked that men are not to be reasoned out of an opinion that they have not reasoned themselves into." But what on earth were they actually talking about? Well, Fisher Ames seems to be musing on the role of government and the possibility of rebellion. The full paragraph goes, "It may be very proper to use arguments to publish addresses and fulminate proclamations against high treason. But the man who expects to disperse a mob of 1,000 men by 10,000 arguments has certainly never been in one. I have heard it remarked that men are not to be reasoned out of an opinion that they have not reasoned themselves into. The case, though important, is simple. Government does not subsist by making proselytes to sound reason, or by compromise and arbitration with its members, but by the power of the community compelling the obedience of individuals. If that is not done, who will seek its protection or fear its vengeance? Government may prevail in the argument, and yet we may lose the Constitution." He was against the French Revolution and thought that unfettered democracy was a huge danger, saying, "A democracy cannot last. Its nature ordains that its next change should be into a military despotism," which is certainly an opinion. So, we can't let the plebs decide what's best, nor can we really persuade them. Rather, we need a populace which fears the vengeance of government. Lovely. Jonathan Swift, on the other hand, coined that phrase while writing "A letter to a young gentleman lately entered into holy orders by a person of quality." Catchy title. And that was all about how clergymen shouldn't bother arguing with silly old atheists, or free thinkers, as he puts it, as they will not be swayed by the facts and logic of the scripture. He said, "And here I am at a loss what to say upon the frequent custom of preaching against atheism, deism, free thinking, and the like, as young divines are particularly fond of doing, because persons under those imputations are generally no great frequenters of churches, and so the congregation is but little edified for the sake of 3 or 4 fools who are past grace. Neither do I think it any part of prudence to perplex the minds of the well-disposed people with doubts, which probably would never have otherwise come into their heads. But I am of opinion, and dare be positive in it, that not 1 in 100 of those who pretend to be free thinkers are really so in their hearts. For there is one observation which I never knew to fail, and I desire you will examine it in the course of your life, that no gentleman of a liberal education and regular in his morals did ever profess himself a free thinker. Where then are these kind of people to be found? Among the worst parts of the soldiery, made up of pages, younger brothers of obscure families, and others of desperate fortunes. Or else among idle town fops, and now and then a drunken squire of the country. Therefore nothing can be plainer than that ignorance and vice are 2 ingredients absolutely necessary in the composition of those you generally call free thinkers, who in propriety of speech are no thinkers at all. The world is provided with the several tribes and denominations of free thinkers who, in my judgment, are not to be reformed by arguments offered to prove the truth of the Christian religion, because reasoning will never make a man correct an ill opinion which by reasoning he never acquired. For in the course of things, men always grow vicious before they become unbelievers. But if you would once convince the town or country profligate by topics drawn from the view of their own quiet, reputation, health, and advantage, their infidelity would soon drop off. This, I confess, is no easy task, because it is almost, in a literal sense, to fight with beasts. So he thinks it's risky to debate atheist talking points in church, because what if you plant seeds of doubt into the minds of believers? He calls atheists heathen philosophers, saying, "Before you enter into the common insufferable cant of taking all occasions to disparage the heathen philosophers, I hope you will differ from some of your brethren, by first inquiring what those philosophers can say for themselves. The system of morality to be gathered out of the writings or sayings of those ancient sages falls undoubtedly very short of that delivered by the gospel, and wants, besides, the divine sanction which our Saviour gave to his." Jonathan Swift thought that the doctrines of Christianity were obvious truths. I mean, they had to be, or God wouldn't have said it. Are you calling God a liar? And that the atheists were just all caught up in their base instincts, their desires for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, whatever the 18th century version of rock and roll was. He thought that they just wanted to ignore the scripture because it was inconvenient to follow it. He also said there was absolutely no point in clergymen trying to sound smart to outwit these heathen philosophers. Because A, he said they're probably not going to church, which is a fair point, but B, because you'll only confuse the plebs. Similarly, Fisher Armes believed that if left to their own devices, the general public would descend into chaos and violence. Even today, that phrase is used to describe the tendency of the masses to ignore the logic and the facts. It's uttered by climate activists to describe the rejection of the science in favour of comforting rhetoric, such as, "But the weather has always changed," or religious beliefs that promise that there is a big boss man God who is in charge of everything, including the weather. It's used by political activists
on both sides.
On the left, we talk about how the working classes are swayed by stories in which they're not oppressed by a system designed to keep them down, but rather they are temporarily inconvenienced millionaires who can beat all the odds to make the system work in their favour. Or far-right narratives in which it's not the capitalists who are holding you back, it's not the hard-to-beat and powerful enemy, it's the refugee, the immigrant, the DEI hire, the easy target who you can effortlessly feel power over. The truth is hard to accept. The stories are more fun to believe. And on the right, facts don't care about your feelings has become a ubiquitous response to any argument which is based in ethics or rooted in a respect for human life and dignity. And we, the left, we will dispute those facts, what don't care about our feelings. We will dispute them till we're blue in the face. But it doesn't seem to stop people voting for the stories, voting for the alternative facts. And I just simply cannot allow myself to come to the conclusion that this is just because people aren't that bright. Not as bright as me anyway, who can see through all the bullshit, who can see things for how they really are, and who has risen above the conditioning. Me, who would never, ever fall for a lie.
I'm autistic. If you're lying to me, I will 100% know. Every single time, without fail. I will sit there and hyper-focus on every single word of every single sentence of every single paragraph that you say. And if you say one thing that is even remotely false, or remotely not true, or remotely doesn't even make sense, I will sit there and hyper-focus on that statement until I have completely proven that point wrong. It ain't gonna happen. My brain's just boom, 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 and it's not gonna happen. I will catch you lying every single time.
You know how the tone of a headline can determine the information that you take from it? You know, like the whole thing where like Palestinians die, but Israelis are killed. Or when people are left dead after police-involved shooting, but we don't often hear about the police officer who killed civilians. And you probably do know that, don't you? You know that a passive and vague description of an event is going to have less impact than a gritty and descriptive one. You've maybe even analysed some headlines you've seen yourself and noticed this trick being deployed. Well done. There's no getting past you, is there? It's like when companies advertise things from $9.99, like you know that you're not paying $9.99 for that. You would never expect to be able to walk into that shop with a tenner and come out with the product advertised. You wouldn't fall for that. So why do they still do it? How come it works? Because it does work. Is it because everyone's a fool except you? Or is there a more reasonable reason? You know, when I first got into politics, I got like really into politics, like politics with a capital P. Like I was watching Parliament Live TV whenever there was a debate or a vote on. I was watching select cabinet committees. I was listening to all the talk radio, reading all the articles, downloading all the manifestos, making notes. And I'd take everything that I'd learned and I'd put them all into my little threads on Twitter. And sometimes I'd expand into blog form. I caught some shit for this from like family and friends who thought that that was a weird thing to do with your time. But it were Brexit and Corbyn and Trump's first term, and I had some time on my hands, undiagnosed autism, and simply couldn't help myself. I also got some appreciation, like not to toot my own horn, but people were like, thank you for summarising this thing that I found complicated and hard to understand. But with great power comes great responsibility, though, done it, and so I don't do that anymore. Politics is too big for me these days. It's a full-time job. Like, not only keeping up with what's being said and done, but then, like, analysing how that relates to reality and, like, human life. They lie. A lot. These politicians. So you got to triple bloody check everything. And it's not enough to just, like, find some articles or whatever, because, like, you know, sometimes the media's in on it too. Some of these journalists are working in symbiosis with the politicians to lie directly to your lovely little faces. And I can't work any kind of full-time job right now, let alone that one. But I did learn something. I learned that full-time jobness of it all, that this is probably why most people don't seem particularly abreast of the ins and outs of the political climate at any given time. People have other shit to do. They're not apathetic. They're tired and busy. And that's how the newspaper headlines work. Print newspapers don't make a profit anymore, but they still make them. They're still made available for free in places like airports. I mean, one reason for this is obviously brand recognition. You're more likely to click on an article by The Sun if you know that that's like an actual newspaper that you've seen out in the world. But it's also political. Passively reading those headlines just because they're sitting in front of you on the table in the doctor's waiting room, that has an effect. Your brain absorbed that concept whether you meant it to or not, just like it absorbed the number 999. And sure, you can analyse what you've read and maybe do. Sometimes. But how many times do you absorb a concept without stopping to analyse it simply because you're busy doing other things? It's most times. You walk past the newspaper stand in a shop and you're not going to stop and read between the lines. You only came in there for cat food and Rizzlers. You're probably not even going to think about it, not because you don't care about the issues of today, or you're unbothered by the plight of others, but because you need to get back and feed the cat and skin up. Our brains, like all of them, not just autistic ones, are constantly trying to make sense of the information they're receiving, categorizing it by aligning it with past information. It uses this information to form concepts. using the language that we have learned. The more that you are in receipt of certain data points, the stronger those concepts will be. I've genuinely seen multiple autism advocates claim that advertising doesn't work on us, that conditioning doesn't work on us, that our thoughts are not influenced by the culture. And that is simply just not how anyone's brain works. You're literally describing the core function of all brains. The whole point of your brain is to take data and make sense of it so it can issue predictions to keep you alive. And the only way that it can make sense of that data is by using the concepts that you have learned from, guess what? Your surroundings. And by the way, logic and emotions are both socially constructed concepts. The thing that does actually happen, though, is this. Marginalised people are more likely to view the systems of marginalisation in a critical way than people who are not marginalised by those systems. It's not because we are uniquely intelligent, it's not because of our pattern recognition. It's because we have a very different, direct, and, dare I say, emotional experience of norms, customs, and systems than other people who don't feel directly harmed by them. Disabled people are always going to be the experts on accessibility, not because they are more intelligent or logical, but because they have the necessary experience to know what is accessible to them and what isn't. They have had to think about it, whereas most people pass their days never having to. Seeing people might not even know what those bumpy lines on the pavement are even for, something they see and walk on every single day. Is it because they're stupid? Or because they don't give a shit about blind people? Or is it because they never had to know and nobody ever told them? Or maybe someone did tell them once, but as their brains never had to reinforce that memory over time, they forgot. Emotions are just one type of many concepts which our brain uses to make sense of the world. And just like every single one of your other concepts, they were learned at some point, and they were remembered and reinforced through experience. To say that you feel something is to describe a reality, and your brain constructs that instance of emotion in the same way that it constructs instances of answering a question correctly. Information is inputted, brain categorizes and conceptualizes based on previous experience, and then predicts what to do. The prediction could be the answer is X because of Y, or it could be you feel X because of Y. You know, this whole left-right sided brain thing is a load of bollocks, right? And you know, like neuroplasticity, which to be fair has turned into a bit of a buzzword, but what it does mean is that, for example, like if something happens to a region of your brain that usually is in charge of doing something, then it's possible, it's not guaranteed, but it's possible that the brain will rewire itself so that another region of the brain takes over the task that the damaged part was doing. There are no hard borders in the brain, and there certainly are no hard borders between rational and emotional thinking. And what if I told you that the only reason we are such rational and logical creatures is because we're so darned emotional? Heathen and non-heathen philosophers alike have long debated the utility of reason. That was actually one of my favourite subjects to study at philosophy, and logic actually was my least favourite. So make of that what you will. Someone's going to call me biased because of that. Like, oh, just because you couldn't understand Bertrand Russell. No, I couldn't. And I don't think any of us are supposed to. But one of me kind of favourite white male modern philosophers, and by that I definitely mean one of the least bad, was David Hume. This fella. Remember, in like art and academia, modern doesn't mean contemporary. This man is long dead and was wrong about a great many things, weren't you, you little polygynist you? But you know, I do think he was right when he dropped this absolute banger. Reason is and ought to be the slave of the passions. Passions here meaning desires, feelings, emotions. This was when rich white men were going around acting like they had invented the very concept of logic, going all, ooh, Age of Enlightenment, innit? Pretending like they're not standing on the shoulders of giant gays and Muslims. You know, because like the ancient Greeks and Islamic Golden Age. Just because we were pretty good at printing books by the time these lads arrived on the scene, they get to be called the godfathers of science. Pisses me off. Indigenous communities around the world had figured out how to produce food in abundance with very little effort. Hello. While these boys were stomping all around the world and empirically deducing that a lack of ploughed fields in the South American jungle meant that the people there had simply not evolved to learn about agriculture yet. You know, rationally. And of course, logically, if they hadn't evolved yet to learn about agriculture, then that kind of makes them subhuman. If you think about it. These were the same guys who scientifically and objectively misunderstood evolution so much that they encouraged probably the worst thing that people have ever done to other people. But their facts didn't care about the feelings or facts of the people who Europeans were enslaving and genociding on a scale previously unimagined. And another thing, people always bang on about Descartes and his radical skepticism, how he examined all of his beliefs to make sure that they held up to scrutiny, like it's some school of lifestyle tip. Like we should all be doing that as some kind of fun self-improvement exercise. He was trying to prove the existence of God. He was trying to ingratiate his philosophy to the church by showing that logic can be used to prove theology. That's fine, do what you want to do. And to be fair, I think, therefore I am is another absolute banger. Like, if you are ever wondering whether or not you exist, then that means you do. But he didn't examine all of his beliefs for a start. For example, he very quickly decided that everything that he believes about the material world can't be trusted, because what if it's the devil playing tricks on us? Or like some future computer alien gods or something. He didn't examine all of the things that he knew about the material world. He just thought, well, I can't believe in any of that because I can't trust my senses. I mean, that's fine for him, but I don't think it's very useful for us. That seems like the sort of thing that these days sends people down some very irrational rabbit holes that come out in the middle of some tech bro cult somewhere. Look, I'm not saying that nothing useful came out of this period and place. You know, like things like the scientific method were developed collectively using previous knowledge from all over the world, but it was, over time, standardized and printed out. I think the scientific method is one of the best things we've ever invented, and it's a tool of pure reason. I'm not here to say that there is no difference between logic and emotion, and I'm not here to undermine the importance of finding facts, developing knowledge, or changing minds. I love all that shit. We all love that shit. In fact, I don't think we would have put all that effort into like developing things like the scientific method if we didn't have a passion for knowledge. If we didn't fucking love science. If we didn't feel the emotions of curiosity, confusion, and intrigue, or satisfaction and excitement when we figure out something new. We have a desire, an inner motivation to want to learn and know. We would prefer it if the things we say are understood, and to live in a world in which we can collectively understand things and each other. If we didn't have an inner drive to discover, we wouldn't formulate logic. Is it because we're logical and rational beings that we figure out theories of physics? Or is it because we just really want to know? Because it's annoying and confusing to not know. And aren't we so happy? Doesn't it feel so good when we actually do figure some of this out. We formulate theories of physics and logic and maths because we want to do things that require them. You can't tell me that the excitement felt by NASA engineers when their spacecraft actually makes it to its destination isn't the primary motivation behind them even being in that room. That they're not there because they looked up at the sky as kids and felt something. A drive. A passion. I get so emotional at scenes like that. And of course, there are logical and rational reasons for sending rovers and stuff to places, data and information that is collected. But we collect it so that we can then put it to the use of, bettering our societies and lives. The whole point of discovery is to see if we can't change things to suit us better. We learn because we are curious, and so do other animals. They don't have the same tools at their disposal, but we're all mostly in the interest of changing our environments to suit us better. Not because that's the most logical thing to do, but because we have a motivation to seek pleasure and avoid pain, to seek comfort and avoid discomfort. We only have facts because we have feelings. Part 2, even this video doesn't really have parts, in which I've been talking for half an hour or so and haven't really touched on autism, and I thought this video was supposed to be about autism or something. It makes me uncomfortable when I don't know something. I actually think that's kind of down to past experiences where I didn't know something and I was made fun of. That happens a lot with autistic kids. We do all say the wrong thing and hilarity ensues for everyone but us. I prefer to talk about things I know about because I get stuck when trying to discuss something I'm unfamiliar with. I need time to think, time to process. Small talk can be uncomfortable because I'm never really sure what to say, and then the awkwardness that comes from that can be very difficult to sit with. I'd much prefer to get to speak about the subjects that I'm comfortable speaking about. Predictability is important to me as an autistic person. I can feel very unsettled when unpredictable things are happening, and I can feel very calm and settled when I know what to expect. Some things, like parties and certain kinds of events, they can feel very unpredictable, and so I don't enjoy these things. Or, I'm simply above the shallow nature of things like small talk and parties. These things to me hold no real purpose, no real reason, and so I'm disinterested. I am simply unable to stoop to such lows. I prefer to talk about real things, factual things, real issues, deep stuff. Like the movies I like. And when others don't want to engage with me and my deep thoughts, well, that's not just them doing what everyone does and avoiding something that they find unpleasant. No, it's because they are baby-brained little pea-heads. It is because they are empty-headed and simply unfit for the task. You see, when I'm disinterested in what others say, it's because I'm too smart. And when they're disinterested in what I say, it's because I'm too smart. It's not just that we find different things interesting and pleasurable. No. There is a hierarchy of all things, and the things that I like are at the top of the hierarchy, and the things that people who go to parties like are at the bottom. Hierarchy of thought and the designation of groups of people as more or less intelligent has been one of the main ways that fascists and colonizers have garnered support for the genocide and ethnic cleansing of minorities, including disabled people. It's literally the last thing we should be upholding, let alone inflicting on other people. And don't get me started on evolutionary psychology. You can kind of make a logical argument for anything. Like, as long as there's like internal consistency, you can kind of make out make sense. Just as those non-heathen philosophers were using the tools of logic to prove their existing beliefs. Logical arguments can hold as logical arguments without necessarily proving the truth of their premises. Proving premises is for telescopes, surveys, and scans and things. But if you already agree somewhat with the premise, then logic is easy. At least it's easy to feel and sound logical. Like, all I'm saying is we are very rarely thinking either purely logically or emotionally. Logical arguments can be used to create emotional responses, and emotional arguments can be used to create logical responses. We all arrive at almost all of our positions through a mix of facts and feelings. And that's a really good thing. But when it comes to making logical sounding arguments, which to me are actually a lot more like wish fulfillment, then evolutionary psychology takes the bloody biscuit. See, I got myself started and now it's too late. You see, I actually don't come from a long line of philosophers and conflict mitigators. I am sorry for misleading you. I actually come from a long line of Irish labourers and peasants who moved to the west of Scotland and then stayed there long enough for my grandparents to meet. My granddad on that side is probably where I get my autism from, and by all accounts, he wasn't a very nice person. But there probably is also some autism, at least some neurodiversity, on my dad's side. The side that was, at one point at least, full of British colonial army officers, some of whom were actually in Ireland helping to oppress and drive out my mum's ancestors. I'm autistic, and I'm practically a living embodiment of one rule for me and another for thee. If all of these philosophers were autistic, then some of them spent their whole lives formulating logical arguments as to why it's right and good that European white people dominate the globe. Okay, look, I'm going a bit hard, but I actually do think it's good that neurodivergent people celebrate their strengths. Neurodivergent and disabled people in general have been pathologized, experimented on, punished, abused, and worse. Much worse. Of course, we should be fighting that, and one way of fighting that is to proudly live our lives, to refuse the narratives which call our lives a tragedy. We should be proud of ourselves, and as I said in my Aspie Supremacy video, nobody else is going to celebrate us. So we had better. And we can celebrate our achievements, our strength and joy without wielding the same weapons which are used against us. The weapons which will always be used against us, so long as they exist. A narrow and hierarchical view of intelligence, the positioning of logic over emotions, the view of evolution as a ladder, and yes, evolutionary psychology. I tried to write this whole section on what I don't like about evolutionary psychology and ended up getting well caught up in the weeds. Because both evolution and psychology are huge topics, and picking apart exactly what is nature and what is nurture takes a lot of words and makes for a really long video. But I am very prone to being dismissive of Evo Psych, but I am sure that there are at least a couple babies drowning in that bathwater. But when I read responses from Evo Psychs to their critics, there is a lot of well, you don't even understand what we're saying, and that's not even Evo Psych, and not much in the way of presenting evidence to the contrary. And honestly, it just puts me off. It's giving Jordan Peterson. As I've remarked in the past, critics of the field, when they err, are not slightly missing the mark. Their confusion is deep and profound. It's not like they are marksmen who can't quite hit the centre of the target. They're holding the gun backwards. Meh. That was from one of the cited responses to the criticisms on the Wikipedia page for evolutionary psychology. Maybe I should take the opportunity to remind evolutionary psychologists that they can actually edit that page if there's stronger arguments. This is from another one. I challenge Miss Begley, that's someone who criticised Evo Psych, to find a culture where, on average, women have had a sustained preference for lazy, submissive, apathetic men as prospective mates. Oh, you mean to tell me that when asked, people typically say they prefer being around people who they would describe with positive adjectives? Oh, so you don't want to live with someone who will make a big mess and not even care? Case closed. Your Honour, I rest my case, which is closed. In that article, the author states that, of course, that we hold these universal preferences does not imply that we'll be able to instantiate them in the mating market. Mating market. Most people end up assorting with partners of roughly equal mating value. Hence, our preferences are evolutionary based, albeit environmental contingencies will likely require us to subconsciously settle for someone other than that dictated by our evolved preferences. That Ashton Kutcher is married to Demi Moore does not invalidate the fact that men on average prefer to date nubile younger women more so than older post-menopausal women. Whoa. He's saying that Ashton Kutcher subconsciously settled for Demi Moore due to environmental contingencies. Now, no matter what I think of him, Ashton Kutcher was not short of options. I'm sure there were plenty of nubile young prospective mates knocking around, but the idea of settling for Demi Moore is just hilarious. He also goes on about how they should be allowed to call things universal, even if they are actually just things that occur on average. Just shielding their broad proclamations of a universal and innate human nature from any evidence to the contrary. Masterful gambit, sir. The article, which again I only found because I was clicking through the citations which were allegedly refutations of the critics of Evo Psych, was full of language like high status, low ranking, equal mating value, and the mating market. It implies a rigid hierarchy of traits, of people. The author outright states that the only influence that environment has on our preferences is forcing us to settle for that which we do not truly prefer. It implies that we are prevented by our environment from being able to fulfill our evolutionary purpose, to scratch those evolutionary itches. That sounds familiar.
You're just better evolved for the world the way it has been for most of humanity's existence.
And so, the thing about our environment is that we can choose to change it. And the ways that we change it are going to be very much influenced by the concepts which we hold. The dangers of using an evolutionary psychology-based framework to inform these changes should be startlingly clear. And many theories of Evo Psych have a bit of a problem. They can't really be tested, because there is no way to know what went on in the minds of ancient people. You see, Evo Psychs hold that ancient problems shaped our brains and therefore our psychology, and honestly I don't doubt that that is the case, to an extent. But the thing is, we can only really guess at what problems ancient people faced. Beyond the absolute basics of eating and drinking and staying warm somehow. In a world where there was probably lots of different ways of eating and drinking and staying warm somehow. We do know that we evolved highly adaptable brains. brains which will easily and quickly wire themselves based on the data they receive. But does that not muddy the task of basing the roots of our behaviour and choices in the distant past? Evo-psychologists will often look to uncontacted or minimally contacted tribes for evidence. But they are modern people. They live right now in the modern world. They are not a snapshot of ancient people. Actually, assuming that they are is again why early European colonisers thought them to be less evolved and therefore subhuman. Evo-psychologists will study babies, subjects who shouldn't be too environmentally influenced yet. But one study I read, which is often cited as strong evidence for the presence of innate fears, posited that 6-month-old babies could not have possibly learned any fear responses yet. Which is bananas to me, considering that by that age we think they can understand nouns. So right, they showed 6-month-old Swedish and German babies pictures of flowers and fish, and then spiders and snakes, and the baby's pupils dilated when looking at the spiders and the snakes. We conclude that fear of snakes and spiders is of evolutionary origin. Similar to primates, mechanisms in our brains enable us to identify objects as spider or snake, and to react to them very fast. This obviously inherited stress reaction in turn predisposes us to learn these animals as dangerous or disgusting. Ignoring the fact that humans have been eating and keeping spiders and snakes since forever, ignore the fact that little kids in the Amazon have fun catching tarantulas, ignore every baby I encountered in Asia who gave not a single shit about the creepy crawlies which were all around them. These European babies' pupils dilated, which obviously means we evolved to find spiders gross. Change in size of the pupils is an important signal for the activation of the neurogeneric system in the brain, which is responsible for stress reactions. But that system is also involved in learning too. Maybe it just signals cognition, encountering something novel and having to work out what it is. Maybe it's a sign that these babies have already seen flowers, but nobody ever dangled a photo of a red-kneed tarantula in front of their faces before. We probably did evolve to quickly learn what things are dangerous. There are plenty of dangerous insects and non-insects, and not all spiders and snakes are dangerous, and it does seem that without that environmental input, kids are not afraid of them. So why on earth would people be saying that this is proof of innate fear of spiders? Because people do run with these studies. What things do we find kind of gross? Maybe there's an evolutionary reason for this. Maybe my racism is just my evolved fear of that which is different, and it's actually good and useful. Maybe we couldn't possibly expect people to live among foreigners. That would go against our innate drives. Now fetch me a high value and nubile mating prospect. I just think it's silly. I think it goes too far. It oversteps. And fine, maybe there are some very good and serious evolutionary psychologists out there doing good work that somehow benefits humanity. But if they are, then I think they'd agree with me that the field isn't doing a great job at PR. They'd probably agree with me that there is a great deal of flat-out storytelling going on in their name. And so if you, dear commenter, want to come at me for misrepresenting the field by pointing to people who are using the field as justification for their crappy ideas, then please, sir, for some reason I get the feeling that you like being called sir, may I direct your remarks towards them. They are imagining an idea of ancient life, and it's an idea that seems to keep getting disproved as more evidence is found. We know that people had to eat, drink, shelter, because we also need all of those things. All life needs those things. But we are learning that life wasn't actually as solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short as some of us previously thought. We are learning that hunter-gatherer communities were extremely varied and actually had quite complex systems in place. We don't even know a fraction of what went on in ancient societies, even how many species of human there were. We are literally only able to scratch the surface, and a lot of that early scratching was done by European white men at a time when European societies were absolutely stifled by hierarchy and some really very silly beliefs. Beliefs which they projected onto the distant past and then wrote down in books which would be studied for generations. We know so little, but what we do know is that ancient societies were varied as fuck. There is no stock type of hunter-gatherer community or ancient city. It's nice to think that neurodivergent skills would have been made use of at certain points, and at certain points they certainly were. And maybe some societies doled out jobs based on your skill set, and maybe some societies you had a lot of freedom about what you actually did with your time, based on how good you are at certain things. But for a large part, people did do what their parents did. They did the things which they had the tools to do and which needed doing. And the tools and the things that you would need to do with the tools would vary a great deal depending on where you are. Due to the genetic nature of things like autism, it's entirely possible that there were like whole communities where there wasn't any. We can't just assume the same distribution of neurodivergencies in ancient peoples as we see today. It does feel nice to talk about autism and ADHD as the glue which held ancient communities together. And you can form an argument that with variety comes strength and endurance, but the rest does not follow from that. Autistic people would have been the philosophers, the conflict resolvers, the pattern noticers. It's a story. We're taking what we know now about autism, knowledge which has come from decades of autistic people getting to share their experience, and we're painting a picture with it. And it's a pretty picture, but we could use the same paint and the same brush to paint something entirely different. I mean, if neurodivergent people are simply designed for times gone by, then maybe we should be gone by. And anyway, endurance is also important for survival. Animals and people who are able to adapt easily, who can make do with harsh conditions when they set in, they do better. Autistic people find adapting to different conditions a real challenge. They might have a meltdown and alert a predator. You see, only wanting to eat similar things won't do, not in a seasonal environment where you don't get much choice over the food. So, more autism in the gene pool is probably a mistake. Change is a part of life. We wouldn't want people who don't cope well with that. It goes against evolution. If you've got ADHD, that means you probably move around a lot, and that will scare away the animals and fish. You'd be a burden on any group which relies on catching animals for food. Forgetfulness is extremely dangerous in a survival situation. If you put down your one and only tool and lose it, that could mean death. Hyper-focusing is exactly what you do not want to do out in nature. You need to be aware. You need to be multitasking, making sure you're not stepping on a snake, making sure there's no wolves following, keeping a mind on your body temperature and energy levels. Your executive functioning needs to be on point. Let's see, it's easy, it's silly, and it's easy. And if what we want to do is imagine a world in which our strengths and achievements are appreciated, then we should do that. It doesn't need to have already happened for it to happen in the future. And placing our worth in the distant past does nothing for existing or future neurodivergent people. And what about all the other neurodivergent people? Where's the Psych explanation for Tourette's and dyspraxia? I don't care where it is, because I'd much rather plan for a future in which people with Tourette's or dyspraxia or anything else are able to live their lives as they want to, without inventing a story about how they might have been useful 10,000 years ago. We can also respect human life without having to assign that life a utility. And the idea that life must be assigned a utility before it is worthy of respect has historically been a disaster for disabled people. And also just like inventing stories about the distant past, about like the usefulness and specialness of certain kinds of people. That's what fascists do. And like a lot of this is just like not just the Evo Psych, but like all of it. It's just so unnecessary. Like we don't need to denigrate others or even compare ourselves to others in order to celebrate our achievements and big deep thoughts. If your thoughts are so deep and higher order, then put them out into the world. Let us hear them. Not going to be for everyone, but that's okay. Sure, this video isn't for everyone, but that's probably good. I don't think I could handle the fame if everyone liked my videos. It'd be a terrible place if we were all interested in the same things. And sure, like, I know people can be dicks about it. Like, it's not that deep. Trust me, it's something you hear a lot when you make long-ass videos about fictional characters. And it is a very annoying turn of phrase. But you could interpret it as like, I don't care about that. And then you should sort of ask yourself, like, should they care about this? Like, is it important that they care about this? And sure, there probably are things that everyone should care about, but whether or not Sheldon Cooper is autistic isn't one of them. It's not that deep could also be a way of kind of shutting down a conversation, and it is like a real dick way of shutting down a conversation, kind of rude. But also nobody is obligated to be in conversation with anyone else. And you know, like, people can be arseholes, but like also capable of thought. And you know, it might come as a shock to hear this, but sometimes people can A, care about a thing, B, be capable of understanding the thing, but C, aren't really in the mood for that right now, thank you very much. I walk past the headlines in the shop without critically assessing what information my brain is receiving, because that's not what I'm doing right now. The busier we are, the less time we have to critically assess information. The more exhausted we are, the less we are likely to want to discuss deep issues over dinner. People have immediate concerns that are important, even if they're not super deep or meta. The putting food on the table, the keeping a roof above our head, the avoiding the immigration patrols, finding a doctor, keeping yourself and your family alive and well. If we want to see a world in which most people get to indulge their interests, get to have long, leisurely conversations about the big questions of life, the universe, and everything, then we should be doing everything we can to create a world in which all people are supported, have their needs met, and their rights respected. We should be dismantling hierarchies and ideas of special people who get to do special things. We should be treating every single person as, to borrow a phrase from another old white man philosopher, an end in themselves. We should be forward facing, not harking back. And if what you want to do is to set yourself apart as unique and special, then fine, keep telling the stories. Actually, thinking that you're the smartest person in any room is a really good way to set yourself apart, physically from all the people who can't stand to be around you. And many autistic people do hate one rule for me and another for thee. I certainly do. Some of us definitely are radical thinkers, the kinds of people who genuinely do change the course of human history. The kinds of people who are out there now every day fighting for the rights of others, working towards advances in so many areas, showing up, volunteering, placing their bodies in harm's way, physically fighting authorities which would oppress us and all vulnerable people. And some of us are Elon Musk. Some of us are black-pilled misogynists with a special interest in phrenology and firearms. So that's what I've been thinking about. If you want a more structured essay on some of this stuff, then check out my Aspie Supremacy video. The writing process on this one was much more of a stream of consciousness type affair, whereas I worked on that one for over a year. Do leave me a comment, but come here. Come here. I don't want the algorithm to know I'm telling you this, but YouTube is now using AI to analyze the comments, and I'm pretty sure they're onto the old comment for the algorithm trick. So if you wouldn't mind instead maybe just saying something that you liked about the video, unless you didn't like it, in which case, why are you still here? You should go away. In fact, you too, you could also, all of you, go away because the video's done.